Our next session will be tackling the topic we've been hearing a lot about throughout these sessions, AI and technology. It's titled Leveraging Tech in Estate Planning. And our moderator is our very own Davis Janowski from Wealth Management. And our speakers are Alex Hargrove, CEO at NetLaw, and Ed Swenson, President at RFG.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us today. My name is Davis Janowski. I am the technology editor for wealthmanagement.com. And if you feel like you saw me somewhere else today, I've been hosting, chairing the AI Assembly Summit. So I decided to take a little break because one cannot live by AI alone and come over and talk about estate planning. The title of our session, Balancing Innovation and Expertise, the Evolution of Estate Planning Technology and Wealth Advisory. The main thing we're going to explore here is exploring how technology is transforming estate planning services while maintaining the critical human element that clients and advisors value. I've been covering advisor tech now on and off for 20 years. I've done a little stint as an analyst and worked at a couple startups as well. But it was only when I came back after about a 4-year hiatus that we started to see this blooming of estate planning technology that was coming about. We have a handful and growing number of estate planning technology tools, but there's a very long established profession within the estate planning area, and that profession is still very much critical despite what you may hear about AI in the area going to save the world. There is absolutely still a definite need for the human touch, the human guidance that's necessary. I'm going to let Alex Hargrove and Ed Swenson introduce themselves, but Ed is the president of RFG Advisory, and Alex is the CEO of NetLaw. But I'll let you guys talk a little bit about your firm. So
great.
Everyone wants to start first.
Sure. So NetLaw/Hargrove firm is a tech-enabled law firm. We practice in all 50 states. There's been a lot of technology companies come into the estate planning space. Sort of what sets us apart is our website down at the bottom says we are a law firm. We do give legal advice. We do have malpractice insurance, and we have licensed attorneys. But we do all that with a tech-forward platform that makes the service scalable and allows it to really be integrated into the wealth manager's business.
Ed Swenson, thanks for having me. Great location. RFG Advisory is a corporate RIA. We service predominantly 1099 advisors, so those that use our platforms, but they're independent firms. They own their own equity, they own their own LLCs, but they operate off of our platform. We're based out of Birmingham, Alabama, but we really have a national footprint, a national presence with about 10 billion in assets under management. I think 2 or 3 of the biggest services that we really help advisors with is navigating technology and integrations, compliance, and marketing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. I just wanted to throw out a couple statistics. As I said, I'm the technology editor for wealthmanagement.com, and we do an annual, what we call Wealth Stack study, and it's a survey of about 400 advisors. And we try to take the pulse. It doesn't go into great depth, but we try to take the pulse every year of different aspects in the tech stack among advisors. We also sort of break down the firms into self-defined categories. The most tech-forward firms, we identify them, and they identify themselves, but we call them innovators. Operators is also fairly tech-forward, not as tech-forward as the innovators, but they clearly see the absolute need for technology to efficiently operate their firms. They are cognizant of the ROI, but they're not quite as adept at diving into new technologies as those innovators. And then we have, and again, these are self-classified. We have folks every year that define their firm as laggards. And by laggard, they have technology. They're not necessarily enamored of their technology. It works. They also think they don't probably get the maximum efficiency out of it. They also have put years into sort of firming up their processes, and they're loath to change that. And they often take a wait-and-see approach when it comes to adopting new technology. And what we found this year that overall, that's across all those categories, overall in this population of about 400 advisors, right around 30%, so about a third of advisory firms, and these range all over the size and scale, but mainly mid-sized firms up to large multi-billion-dollar AUM firms, about 33% are using an estate planning technology platform. Now that percentage goes up greatly when you're talking about those innovator firms. That goes up to 44%. And what we find among innovator firms is they're very focused on the ROI. They tend to have higher revenue, higher profitability. They do roll the dice sometimes. They adopt technology, they try it out. It doesn't work to standards, or they pick the wrong particular vendor. They change, they switch lanes to something else and keep going. And so I was going to start sort of there and talk to you guys a little bit about the current state of what you see. And Ed, when we were doing the planning for the call and I shared those numbers, you mentioned that 30% adoption sounded a little low, given all the decreasing barriers to adoption. From your perspective, managing a very sizable firm, what's really holding firms back from adopting the technology, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so when we did the prep call for this this panel, Davis mentioned only about 30% of advisors use some kind of tool or technology for estate or wealth planning, which I thought was really low. And I think it's low for the following reason. First off, the tools have gotten a lot better and a lot easier to use. And so I think in the past, you really had to have a lot of subject matter expertise around some of these skills to have the right kind of conversations. The second reason I'm surprised is that I believe clients, the end client, is demanding more of their advisor every day, right? So from a technology perspective, from a services perspective, it's gotten to be a very competitive market. And so these are tools that are readily available, the integrations are there, and as I said, they're easier and cheaper to use. And so that is surprising to me. The last thing I'd say is 30% of advisors use the technology. 65% of US households have no estate planning documentation at all, 65%. And then if you look at those that have children, over 50% don't have any kind of plan for if they were to die, who their children, who they go to, And then lastly, if you think even just like pets, like where's the pet go and things like. So these are like, to me, very low hanging fruit to deepen a relationship with your end client, to have those important conversations that help drive a relationship, to get more wallet share, to be more of a quarterback for your end client. So anyway, that's kind of my initial thoughts on that stat that you gave us.
Well, I'm also curious, among your clients, is there a lot of outreach to the next generation, or how does that sort of work at your firm?
I think there's never enough. I think it's difficult, right? And you hear that you tend to lose assets when the initial client, they leave, and you don't have a Gen 2 relationship. So I think this is another way potentially of cementing that relationship, having a plan in place, bringing the next generation along. And again, I just go back to, this is not the world of 10 years ago. There are tools readily available. We can talk about some of them that I think are quite easy and quite efficient and very inexpensive to use.
And a quick poll just of the crowd here. If you're an advisor at a firm, I'm curious, do you have sort of a formalized process of reaching out to that next generation of client, whether it's through the parents or grandparents or directly to them? Raise your hands if your firm does have that. Well, not quite as many as I would expect. Okay. So Alex, this question's for you. From your work with big firms like Mariner Wealth and Carson Group, what are you seeing in terms of how the technology is being integrated into estate planning workflows these days?
So we work with a lot of large RIAs to basically be a law firm that's an extension of their firm. And I think a lot of firms would like to have their own law firm, right? Any of the big firms that have resources, they have senior wealth strategists or attorneys. They use different labels, director of estate planning, what have you. But of course, the common theme is they can't practice law. And that's because of the way law firms are regulated in the United States. You can only draft documents if you're a lawyer, not just a lawyer, but a lawyer practicing inside a law firm that's only owned by lawyers. So there have been some firms that have kind of figured out ways to still go about doing that. I would certainly caution anybody wanting to start their own law firm. It's not the nicest business, nor easiest business to run and go out and start, particularly when you need 50 state coverage, right? So we come in and we offer to basically fill that gap there for them. We integrate our technology with their technology, so no matter what state the client's in, it's the same process to refer to us. It's the same process to log in, schedule a meeting, use your firm's single sign-on. We white label everything for the firm. So for the client, it feels like they're still in the firm's ecosystem, but at the same time, they see independent law firm, we take the responsibility for the advice, not the firm that's referring them. And we also do little things like incorporate their corporate trustee. So if the firm's got a corporate trust company, we'll incorporate their language in the documents, and we'll make it sort of an easy button for the corporate trustee to get appointed for clients coming from that firm.
As someone who, and only tangentially, we have a gentleman named David Lennick, who is actually an estate attorney on our staff, and he does the sort of in-depth, I won't call them reviews, but interviews with firms rolling out technology. But I'm curious, and you don't have to name technology platforms, so I'm wondering, A, do you see one or two of those firms offering the technology that are kind of dominating the market?
Yeah, so almost every firm we work with has a AI-enabled estate planning layer there, and we sit right alongside there. There's a tranche of clients where that's the end game, so they're comfortable with the client going through a do-it-yourself process. For some firms, that's at $1 million, where they start to get a little uncomfortable with that. For some, it's $5 million. I don't think wealth is always the best proxy for whether there's complexity that needs an attorney, but it's often used as that. And the firms will have a level of comfort with the do-it-yourself solutions. Once you get past a certain point, it's, well, now we need to talk to a law firm. And really, our competitors in that space are local law firms. And they're wonderful competitors to have. They're a lot of great people, but they're not great at marketing. They're not great at client service. Their net promoter scores tend to not be very good. And worse, you have clients in lots of different states. So you're not just working with one law firm, you're working with dozens of law firms that are probably on a spreadsheet somewhere that somebody's put together inside your firm. And getting on that spreadsheet probably meant one advisor had a good experience some time ago with that firm. And really, that's usually the extent of diligence that's done on those firms. So we provide that kind of seamless experience. And yes, we have our sort of quasi-competitors. We're sort of in different places in terms of where we play, but they'll do an AI analysis on a client and they'll upload it into our platform and then have an initial consultation with one of our attorneys, and we love it. It's summarized for us. They kind of have it right there on a platter waiting for us to work with.
Well, for myself as a journalist, I'm confronted with just an absolute slew of press releases on a daily basis. And again, like I said, when we started, there are a handful of estate planning technology platforms, and they are doing a great deal of marketing these days. But I am curious from your standpoint, and again, I'm not expecting you to name any particular firms, but do you think there is sort of an over-reliance among some RIAs on these tools? I know.
I think what you've seen is kind of a rush to say local law firms don't scale. Oh my God, these tools are great. Let's run over here, and kind of forgot why we worked with lawyers in the first place. And I think you don't really see the reckoning from all those estate plans that are getting created without a lawyer being involved for, years, decades down the road. So I think at a certain point, there's going to be a bit of a pullback that says, wait a minute, maybe we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, and we should look at how can we get that kind of same turnkey experience and integration that turns into a service our firm's offering to our clients, but still get professional advice from a lawyer that's going to be accountable for the advice they're giving.
And maybe starting with you, Alex, but also for you, Ed, what are you seeing? As I said, we see an awful lot of marketing around the firms that have rolled out technology, and some of them you would just think, they're doing just about everything you would need to do. And when you get them one-on-one, they will, of course, start to say, well, you still need probably to talk to attorneys on this or that, or if there's specific questions, they may refer you to one. But what do you see as perhaps some of the shortcomings that advisors who've not yet adopted one of these or are shopping around, what are some of the shortcomings, or at least things they need to be prepared for when it comes to the technology platforms?
Well, I think that what we're really talking about is how do you add more value to your end client? And I think that where some of these tools are really beneficial is that you're having more conversations, you're bringing in lawyers, you're bear hugging that client in kind of a unique way, right? And so these are what these tools enable in a way that you couldn't have done it, 15 years ago. Some of the tools, and we don't, I guess, have to name names, but some of them do really good synopsis of existing plans. And that at least gives you a baseline of a conversation with your end client. That's really important if you're a financial advisor. And it's really hard to read through these documents and figure that out, right? And so we have tools now that allow that. I do agree, there's no substitute for having a lawyer on documentation, but I also think that these tools, like a lot of tools coming, allow the advisor to have more conversations. So I think as far as things like PII and confidentiality and cybersecurity, all these things are very, very real. And I think that it's important that you have the right kind of governance and guardrails when using these tools. But overall, I think it's overwhelmingly positive for advisors to have these tools enabled and to have partnerships with lawyers who then can consummate and memorialize what it is that was established with the customer and client. If you're not doing it, someone else is going to be doing it. And my hope is that as these tools have gotten easier, cheaper, and more automated, you're just doing more volume, like anything. If you want more of it, make it cheaper, make it easier. And so hopefully that is a boon for lawyers and for everyone in the estate planning ecosystem, and clients are getting a much better outcome for themselves and their families.
I hear from the technology side themselves, and they tout about the not just the efficiency, but the accuracy of the AI reading documents and finding issues to point out. I was curious with both of you, does that really jibe with what you see on the ground in terms of, oh yeah, this, it's gotten good. Most of these have gotten good at reading the documents, sparing me hours of having to pore through, and then I get to address that really hard issue that it's identified? Or are they still missing a lot?
Can I answer that one first? Because I think Alex will appreciate this. If it's very important, I love using a tool to do an analysis, but I will leave it to the lawyers to actually do the hard work of finding if there's something in there that I didn't catch. So I think the tools are amazing, but I would not do something substantial without having a lawyer look through it. There are also real liability issues here. And so when you talk about clients of certain net worth, you do not want to be in a position to do that. You want to be guiding them, but you're not a lawyer, so you don't really want to play that role.
And I would just add, we use the tools. We're integrated with Anthropic's model. We use AI, I would say, intelligently through the whole process. What we don't do is put the AI in front of the advisor, in front of the client. We give the attorneys, the paralegals, the AI. So we're having Claude review documents before we meet with the client, but the lawyer's reviewing that output from that, going back and referencing the documents, and then they're accountable for what they say to the client. So there's somebody that's a human in the loop there, that's licensed, that's responsible for the explanation the client's getting, not Anthropic said it, so it must be the case.
Well, that opens a question we didn't talk about in planning, so I'm just going to throw this out there. It's been big news in the past months, Anthropic and some of the other LLM providers working more directly with wealth management firms, some of them very, very large. When you have, say, worked with Anthropic, are they training the LLM on your specific, and how to put it, trying to achieve the expertise you would have, or are you guys having to go in and help Anthropic with that expertise?
No, as the models get better, they get generally better, which is better at everything, including estate planning. So we're not doing any custom training of a model. We have our own custom prompting, so we do our own meeting note taker. We get there's 3 different meetings we typically do. We know what information we need to get out of each one of those. So we have our own prompts, and we'll take the Zoom transcript and run it through Anthropic and get really good results out of it. That's part of our effort with the prompting. But no, we have training turned off. We use the private enterprise versions of it. Everything's transient, so Anthropic doesn't store any of our data. It goes in there, it sends us back a response, and then the data's gone on their end, and they're not training on that data.
Do you think that those firms that are, they're very highly capitalized, probably more than our homegrown, sort of indigenous within the advisor ecosystem platforms, would you be fearful in saying that the Anthropics of the world and their close competitors might achieve breakthroughs or get far ahead of some of the homegrown offerings that are out there?
I think if I was purely a technology company, I'd lose sleep every night over it. But they're not going to go hire lawyers, and they're not going to take responsibility for legal advice coming out of Anthropic. I don't see any world in which that's the case. So I think the real moat for our business vis-a-vis the model providers is the fact that we have humans that are ultimately acting as a filter between what's coming out of the model and what's going to the client, and taking responsibility for being that filter in the middle.
Okay. Ed, this one's for you. You've emphasized the technology should really enhance rather than replace advisors. How do you see the ideal partnership between the technology and what your advisors do? And sort of where do you see the starting point as where it should be for most firms in using the technology?
Well, I'm gonna make a few assumptions here, and then people can ask in Q&A or disagree. My assumption would be that most advisors want to build practices that are growing, right, and where they are efficient, and that they can utilize technology, And this is an opportunity right now, like in the last 3 years, that reminds me of like when we went from servers to cloud-based systems right around 2008, 2010. It's just an enormous unlock as far as what's coming. I think what it'll allow advisors to do is service more clients and customers, number one. Number two is have more tailored advice, more data on each, client and each event, each conversation in a very positive way. And then third, the integrations between the systems are just getting better and better and better. So I will name one note taker. It started off as note taker, which is Zox. And their CEO sits on our board right now. And what we're seeing as far as go from a prospect meeting with a new customer or client, note taker ingests that. There's an MCP, which is like a handoff to a financial plan, and it fills out the financial plan, and it's all done like that.
Yeah.
And that would have taken, like a day or maybe half a day for a CSA or someone on the team.
Yes.
That's now done almost immediately. Now, that doesn't mean you take that and you just hand it to the customer client. You should review it. You should do that work. But like, where are we going as an industry? It's phenomenal. Now you're going to see LLMs integrated with custodians, right? You're going to have the data side ingested. You're going to have that pre-populated. A lot of the paperwork that we've spent so much of our lives having to figure out and unpack, and that's going to be automated. So this is a big unlock coming, and it's like here right now in the next year or two. And I think harnessing that technology, I do think having a partner, being safe with it. I would not go home and use your personal, Claude or ChatGPT or whatever. You want it to be in a sandbox, which is controlled by the firm. And so that PII is safe, but it's a huge unlock for advisors. And I think ultimately customers will benefit. And just like you shouldn't do things without a lawyer, I think the financial advisor is empowered in this process. So I see human in the loop working. I see more volume. I do not see advisors, at least the good ones, being disintermediated by technology. I see them being enhanced by technology. I think they're going to do better. They're going to grow bigger businesses effectively.
Are you hopeful that some of the other, the Zocs of the world, the Jumps of the world, are you hopeful that they are all going to go sort of the route that Zocs is going and be able to sort of add value to that particular part of the advisory business and be able to share data in a way that you noted Zocs is able to do with getting financial planning?
Yeah, I mean, the Zocs roadmap, which I know well because we work with them, is going to be integrating with Schwab and Fidelity and Pershing ultimately in that order. And I think that will make the advisor's life a lot more simpler. And I think that they're trying to solve some of the hardest problems right now. So it does them no good to kind of be Anthropic 2.0 with like a very shallow. What they're doing is what we call like agentic, right? Not just exposing data, but what's the next step in a value chain. They're trying to figure that out. That's not easy.
No.
That's not something that one of us in this audience can vibe code on a weekend and think we're awesome. That takes actual engineering talent and vision and resources. But what the output will be for all of us is really, really good.
Well, I will add to that those two in particular, I cover them closely, and there are two that have raised significant money. Zocs raised like $44 million in venture capital and Jump even more not long ago, and that gives them a bit of a war chest and runway to do a lot of development in that area in particular. So, and one more for you, Ed. You mentioned estate planning tech as a driver of enterprise value. Can you kind of break down that business case? How does it translate to recurring revenue, improved profitability?
Yeah, I think this is really important for those advisors who are independent in the audience. There are really three things that add to enterprise value. There's the size of the firm, there's the growth rate of the firm, and there's the profitability of the firm. Those are like 80 to 90% of the drivers of a multiple on some kind of EBITDA that a firm would be valued at. In all cases, estate planning, financial planning, using this technology should enhance those numbers. Why? Well, ROA, right? Your fee should be bigger if you're doing more for the customer client. It also helps maybe with organic growth. So over $3 million, most wealthier clients, high net worth clients, they have more than one advisor. 66% of them, right? 2/3 have another advisor somewhere else. So if you can quarterback it, if you have the ability to do estate planning, you've got to see it all, right? You have the potential to manage more. You're offering a better service. And I think using technology efficiently, you're going to grow that business. So ultimately, using this technology correctly, going say from 33% user adoption to say we should be somewhere around 80% user adoption, better practice, more profitable, growing more quickly and larger. Those are the multiple, that takes you from a 6x multiple up to a mid-teens multiple of EBITDA, which is how this market is valuing RIAs right now.
I would also add that a majority of the advisors that go through our process, they learn something about that client they didn't know before. The client has a brokerage account they didn't know they had, has a business in a different state, has some family situation going on. Clients are going to tell you a lot of things, much more so than they will with a kind of online questionnaire when they have a lawyer sitting there and they're spending a few hours with that lawyer and you have a seat right there at that table. So I think estate planning is often viewed as it's a nice service I need to provide to retain my clients or to get referrals from Schwab or, check some boxes. But I think the real high hanging fruit there is deepening those relationships with both the client, the next generation, and sort of uncovering things, that broader picture that Ed is talking about that you get going through the estate planning process with your client.
Well, we're going a little deeper there and sort of a segue on what Ed was talking about. Back when we were talking about planning for this session, you had mentioned sort of the spectrum of billing approaches from your firms work with different RIAs. And the old adage is you meet one RIA and you've just met one RIA because every RIA does things differently, and that often goes with billing as well. Can you walk us through the models you've seen and maybe a little bit about what drives each firm or some of the big firms to choose different approaches?
Yeah, so we have some firms for whom estate planning is a big differentiator. The clients never see a bill. We bill them on a monthly basis. The clients go through, they've completely removed payment friction as part of the process. I can tell you those are very happy clients that go through that process. They feel like they're paying one fee and they're getting a lot. A number of smaller firms that I've talked to have said, that's kind of a way they can compete with the bigger firms. They're willing to eat some costs every now and then. Estate planning, it's not something you do every year. It's a cost you're going to have once, maybe 4 or 5 years if the client's really active in this space. We have other firms that are kind of different shades of that will be a hybrid. So certain tranches of clients, they'll pay for certain levels of planning, and then when it gets to a certain point, or they'll do it through reimbursements. And then we have others where they're much more hands-off, and oftentimes the advisors may not even show up to the meetings, and the clients are on their own to pay. Obviously, I think the best experiences our clients and the advisors have is when the advisors help prepare the client, the advisors show up to every one of the meetings. Our system's built so they can integrate their calendar. So when clients schedule meetings, it's always going to make sure they're available. They're going to automatically get the calendar invite and know what's going on. So at the minimum, show up and be an active participant in the process with the client.
Well, how do you both see the economies evolving when it comes to the technology in terms of reducing delivery costs? Do you think it is going to bring it down? I mean, surely it's going to bring down the cost of what, because my wife and I, it's been about 10 years ago, we had one daughter and we did an estate plan. It was not an inexpensive process. Do you think that is going to, the economics are going to be able to bring it, the economics of having the technology with the human experience is going to allow costs to be driven down?
Yeah, in the big markets, absolutely. I mean, you look at our pricing compared to a San Diego or a Miami, and it's it's a kind of a step function in difference. In the smaller markets, we're more competitive, and what we're selling is more scalability than we are price competitiveness. Yes, we have flat fees. They're the same in all 50 states. They're extremely competitive in big markets. But the bigger complaint you hear about estate planning attorneys is they don't return your phone calls. They cut the advisor out of the process. It takes 2 months and you have to reach out and say, as the client, you got a meeting with the client yet? You haven't met with the client yet? Oh, they're back. The good ones have a 3-month waiting period. If your estate planning attorney has an opening the next day, that's probably not a good sign.
Ed, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would take it just like a slightly different view of it, which is costs are also like a function of like the people required and, to do it. So I think that you're going to see, like I already said, you don't need as many people within a practice to offer some of these financial planning capabilities, right? If you have a note taker, I mean, we have a team I talked to the other day. Their process used to be, and someone mentioned an engineer in the last panel, so that was top of mind. It used to be they'd have 3 people in every client meeting. One was the lead financial advisor, one person would do the work, and one person would take notes, right? That's a really expensive hour, right, with their client. Now they have one person, and the note taker is automatic, and as I already said, it pre-populates a whole bunch of things. That frees up 2 person hours, right? Same with the execution then of that plan, not having to have someone take an afternoon and do that. So I see this as like total cost of ownership, not like one piece or another piece. I think what that allows you to do is reallocate money towards the real value in the chain, which is having a great lawyer, having a great financial advisor. So I think you're going to see margins in the business expand, but I don't think that the fee is necessarily needing to go down for end clients.
Okay. Well, I always like the audience to be able to take away some concrete points from these. So for both of you, if you're talking to a firm in the audience here that's considering estate planning technology, what are the top 3 considerations they should prioritize, in your opinion? And whoever's got it top of mind.
I mean, as you figure out technology, figure out the human in the loop to go with it. And in most cases, you're not going to want to be the human in that loop, or at least the last one.
Yeah, I'd say if you are not one of the 33% that your survey said doing it, you should consider doing it. I think there's a lot of value. I also think there's a lot of value in having great partners on the legal side, on the banking side, small business, owners. So I just think that, yeah, this will make your practice more valuable to that end client, which will allow you to have a better relationship with them, get more wallet share, grow faster.
Are there particular compliance things that a firm should keep top of mind when it comes to thinking about adopting this kind of technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, you should have that technology posture where it's protected in a sandbox at the business, not at one's home or in a personal environment. So that for starters. Depending on the size of business, obviously you need to have policies and procedures that take into consideration all the things that you're doing as far as a new process. A lot of these softwares, though, I would just urge people to try them and use them. They're pretty good. I mean, they've created an ecosystem within the software, which is fairly protected. You're not going to get in a lot of trouble, other than playing a lawyer at the end of the day when you're not. That there are liabilities there. Yeah.
Well, I did want to save a few minutes for Q&A. I see you back in the room.
You may have touched on this already, but discuss the stakes element a little bit of this hot set. It's like a crazy player. Part of the state process.
That's a great question. So that's on our long-term roadmap. Right now, we've got lawyers, of about 100 lawyers across all 50 states, many of whom maintain a separate probate practice. So we're always happy to make referrals out on those, but we haven't, and it's a beast to solve, at a national level going in. I think there's 80 different counties just in Florida alone. And then within those, you've got different forms in kind of different areas that are used. So I think it's going to be a difficult challenge, to be able to go out and really apply technology to that. And it's one we haven't embarked on yet.
And are the laws changing fairly frequently throughout the country? It is often state.
That is probably the slowest area of law to evolve across states, is the adoption of uniform codes. And it's not the forward-thinking people that end up in those positions, typically making those kind of decisions at a state or much less a county level.
Ed, anything to add to that? Okay.
That's something you refer out to. You have, well,
Well, we would have hopefully done the estate planning work on the estate. We wouldn't do any of the estate settlement or probate work right now. We'd refer all that out.
Other questions? Oh no, come on, there's got to be another. Yes, please.
For Alex.
Are all direct clients through advisors, or you might come to you separately?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally they find us on the internet and we try to be helpful, but we don't market directly to clients. We only work with wealth advisors. Now we work with independent wealth advisors, not just large RIAs. But the advisor really plays an important role in the process, and chiefly in the follow-up at the end. So there's beneficiary designations, there's funding that has to happen. We can help with deeds, we can help with LLC assignments, but the advisor typically takes the baton and we work out a plan with the advisor. So they're actually a part of the process that would be missing if we went directly to clients.
Yeah, I've got time for one more question, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious,
Ed, how you what you can create looks like for rolling out a new tech tool at user group, but picking which tools to prioritize. Do I so much capacity, but then to bring you down.
Yeah, so a great question. And the question was around how do you define grade, how do you define which technology, and that process. One thing I think I've learned on this, which I would say is strategy should come first, not the technology. So I think one, as we talked about, every RIA is slightly different, right? And so you've got 14,000 snowflakes out there in the RIA world, right? What makes you a great RIA? There's some value prop, right, that you either personally or as a firm have a process and you can implement in your market. That's your brand. That's going to drive a lot of the value that you provide in the market. I would isolate that first and then find the technology that fits it. Because they're probably about, like, say, financial planning. I could probably rattle off 10 different providers of financial planning. They're all pretty good, but they're all really different. One focuses on income. One's more Monte Carlo. One's more estate planning. One's more asset protection. So I think it just goes to, like, defining the technology after you've done the work on the strategy side. And then there are a lot of great options. Honestly, the Kitsis map is a great spot to start. And then just doing some preliminary research. And I would also make sure the funding of that group that you're partnering with is pretty solid. Because there's quite a lot of turnover in our market on the technology side, like every industry, and you don't really want to invest your strategy in a technology that in 3 years is obsolete. So it's important that they have funding, because a lot of these firms and technology in general is burning, right? Their burn rates are pretty high, and you want to make sure they're around for a decade or more if you're going to build your practice around those processes.
All right.
That helpful.
Well, we're out of time, guys. Ed, Alex, really, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It was great.